Well, man, I hope we still have the energy. We've been talking a lot before.
I know, dude. We had quite the pre-podcast show meeting, folks. It's a really, really important day. It's November 8th, 2022. Why, you ask? Because this is podcast 632.
Yes, it is.
The Crushing Iron podcast 632 is a very important day. It's November. We are inching our way closer to the greatest holiday there is, Thanksgiving. It's a dreary yet a little bit warm day here in Overland Park, Kansas. I hope everyone is doing fantastic and had a great weekend. Ironman Florida was this weekend, a couple other big races, big marathons, as we look forward to capping out the year with Ironman Arizona, Cozumel, a couple 70.3s in December. But it's been a great year. It's been a long year. We appreciate you tuning in today. If it's your first time listening, thank you. We know your time is valuable, and you have a whole lot of triathlon podcasts to choose from. So we appreciate you tuning in today, giving us an opportunity to get in your ear. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also some race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk a lot about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I both work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level athletes looking at their very first 5K or even sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to Kona, and everyone in between and from all over the world. We'll use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, text messages, emails, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also frequently utilize our Facebook group. You can search that on Facebook, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question, we'll let you right in. Amazing community and an outstanding resource for all your burning questions and desires in triathlon. It can be a very confusing training world that we live in, and there's a lot of great people in there. It really is a great community, tons of experience, same levels, very similar to the ones we work with. We got beginners who are just thinking about doing a triathlon and trying to get more information. And then you also have athletes who have been on the podium at Kona or even won big-time Ironman races, and then everyone in between. So we've all got experiences, which means we are all wise in our very own way. And so if you have questions, pop them in. Let the group lift you up and answer some of those questions and clear the way for a better path for you in your triathlon journey. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We definitely don't do ads, but we do have one agenda, and it's an important one and one very dear to our hearts, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yep. And I was actually happy and healthy last night. I went down and did yoga.
You did yoga?
Oh, yeah.
At Boca Vista?
Boca del Vista. I was there, boy, and it was Boca del Vista last night. It was some restorative yoga. Felt really good. Hit the sauna afterwards. And, I was sitting in the sauna, and I was running late because the Badger Hoops started last night. I had to catch the first game. But, I was thinking about that after I left. This is how old I am. Like, I could have easily just come home whenever and watched it whenever. But I was like, no, it starts at 7:30. I got to get there. And it was the first basketball game of the year, like big deal, right? So, but I kind of got home. I'm like, oh, man. But it was sitting in the sauna after yoga, and I was like, man, I really feel like swimming right now. And I didn't do it.
And you didn't do it.
Unbelievable. Well, I mean, those are the feelings. How often do you get those where you're just like jazzing to go work out?
Man, sometimes. I mean, like, for me, it's in the morning. Like, in the, we're kind of on the same page in our topic for today. And in the last, week or two, we've been focusing a lot on, last podcast was, figuring out your want, get things into a space where you want to train, you want to work out, or at least, not for a race, but just for yourself, right? To be healthier and have a better life, be able to do more things and, not get winded, just, general baseline stuff I think we tend to overlook as triathletes because it's all about, optimization and peak performances and stuff like that. And we get so far away from why we got into the sport, for most, which was, midlife crisis, trying to lose weight, trying to get healthy, trying to be competitive. We didn't pick up golf. We didn't pick up pickleball. We decided to play triathlon, and here we are. And we get so lost in the weeds that we lose our way. And then before that was, time management and boundaries and, using words like, no, I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to do that. I do want to do something for myself. And so was thinking about this yesterday, and I guess you've been along the same lines, is, figuring out, I think we all have, and one of kind of the main things we've been discussing, or the phrases has been, or the words have been resistance. I think we all have some level of resistance in our lives to something, or against something, and it makes us just not want to do it. And obviously the longer you don't do something, the more resistant you are to doing it. And it becomes easy to not do, because you find more excuses are more readily available, and you can rationalize things. Oh, well, I do have this to do, and I do have this to, you know what, you deserve it today. And you're like, well, yeah, you deserve it every day, but doesn't mean you can't still do both. And so one of the things for me that I've been trying to troubleshoot the last 2 days, because got back to training pretty consistently the last 2 weeks, ever since Haircut Gate, my girl Teresa, who I'm going back to see tomorrow. I'm really trying to work through, doing some intense meditation and brain spotting and therapy to make sure I don't come in with, resenting her. But my hair is pretty long. And I say long, it's because it's full. Okay, it's full. I got a full set of hair. So I'm gonna see what she says when I walk in. But no, it's serious. In all seriousness, so been in a great groove.
You're gonna turn your head.
Well, that's right.
So she can't see.
Yeah, so it's like just dim the lights just a smidge, okay? Because you got blonde hair, a pasty white scalp, and then bright lights. Like, what do you? I'm surprised you can even see my hair. Okay, like, do me a favor, and I'm right in the front. Okay, like close to the glass, the sun's shining through. Like, I'm surprised she hasn't.
You haven't thought about this at all, have you?
No, not at all. I probably walk in there looking like fucking Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. Like, it's probably how I look, and she's like, oh, yeah, you thinning out a little bit. I'm like, come on, Bray, I got hair like Fabio. Anyway, I digress. So I've been super consistent, but something that I think all coaches go through, and I know you and I go through it, is that we all need our own time. And for me, and I think we also know, if we've trained enough, and I made this comment earlier today to another athlete, that over the course of your training life, however long you've been doing it, you've probably figured out or found that you work out better in certain times of the day. Early morning, late afternoon, evening. People sometimes crush it in the evening. That's not me, right? I'm usually an early morning guy. But what I found over, especially the last 6 months, is that running, I'm always best getting out the door and getting it done, right? When it's dark outside, or I'll take waffles with me. We'll do a little bit of easy run. It's a great way to just get my mindset, get my mind right for the day. I'm more, if from a running standpoint, I'm more likely to not run as the day gets on, for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why. I don't want to do it. Cycling wise, I like to work out in the mornings, but I've found specifically in the last 6 to 12 weeks, and then a whole lot leading up to Wisconsin 70.3, when I was training really well, is that I perform significantly better on the same workouts later in the afternoon, like 1 to 4 o'clock. My heart rate will be lower, my power will be better, my perceived exertion will be lower for the same watts. Everything feels easier. But, and again, this is going to kind of figuring out things again, because when it goes back to performing at your best, consistency is number one, right? So clearing a path, figuring out ways to be more consistent is always key to your performance. And it is the same way. It's the same thing for you and I. And I ran yesterday morning. I got up, then I had a bike workout scheduled. Wasn't a good one. When I mean good one, I mean like wasn't going to feel very good. I knew that going into it. But Mondays are tough, right? As a coach, and this is it. Like, for coaches who do this full time, and this is why the burnout rate is so high, is you live and breathe triathlon, right? Your text messages and phone calls and emails, 90% of them revolve around triathlon, right? Because your athletes text you, email you, want to call, want to set up a Zoom call. That's triathlon. Your own hobby is triathlon, right? You're still trying to get better at doing a sport. Your podcast is triathlon. That's a lot of triathlon, right? And so what I found for myself yesterday is I got home, I had a little bit of time left before Hayden got home from school, and I was like, all right, I could hop on the bike. But I was like, man, I just felt like this huge like bubbling up of resistance. I was like, I don't, because even for me as a coach, like if I hop on the bike, and I have a hard time disassociating things in general, but when it comes to racing or in training, as even when I'm on the bike doing a session, I'm thinking about how I'm executing it, How is it going? Is there a way that I can write this out in a different way for athletes to do better? Or is this a good topic for the podcast? Or is this a good, paragraph in our weekly email? Or is this something I should address on Zoom? And like, you're doing something for yourself, but you're also like, because of the nature of what we do, it also kind of gets like enmeshed in each other. And then before you get done, you're like, was that really even time for myself? Right? Is it even time? So I didn't do a bike workout yesterday. And I was like, you know what? Maybe it's just the wrong time of day. Even though I know I'm going to bike better in the afternoon, I know that. What if I just wake up, do a short run, take waffles out, checking something off the responsibility box, don't do any work, and then go ahead and get my ride in? I know it won't be, won't feel as good, but at least I'll do something for myself before the day gets ahead of itself. So I hopped on the bike this morning. It was hard. I did well, but I shelled myself. And it was significantly harder than it would have been in the afternoon, but I did it. Now, I don't know how long that's going to last in terms of like always do it in the morning, because I do want to feel better when I ride.
Yeah.
Because you get a better response. But the key is to getting it done. And so I think there's all things in our training life, and a lot of times it's specific. Like, you're resistant towards going to the pool, you're resistant towards getting on the bike, you're resistant towards running on a treadmill, you're resistant towards something specific. And I think one of the main things we can do, or you don't do something in the morning, so you basically write it off the rest of the day. So I think this is a great time of year as we're kind of moving through, clearing a path, depolluting, your life in a lot of ways, choosing yourself, setting yourself up for success, executing better time management, having better boundaries, all these things, is to figure out, some of the main reasons why we don't want to do X, Y, and Z. And then if we can figure that out, well, maybe there's an alternative way that will set us up to do it better or more frequently, or not have so many opportunities to allow ourselves to make excuses, because that's when really, like, setting yourself up for success is the main game. Because if you can do that, then you can be consistent. But along the way, you've got to kind of figure out why you're not doing things, so you can do more things better and more consistently.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm definitely a late day guy. I can't do anything. I shouldn't say can't, but I'm not a big fan of doing things, hard workouts in the morning. I like kind of getting into the day, and when we go to like run camp, I'll be getting up. I was just thinking about, I've trained for like almost 10 years straight for Ironman every year, and I'm always in this phase where I just kind of want to feel a little bit more pliable or grounded or something. And the word grounded was coming up in my writing this morning a lot. And especially after yoga. And I was like, I felt so, when I got done, I just felt grounded, and I just decided to go and do a sauna after that. And I remember sitting in there, and I really had this sort of clarity. You know how when you're meditating, everybody says, I can't meditate because I have too many thoughts and everything like that. And I was in there just breathing, and I was like clear. It was really weird. And I was thinking about that concept of being grounded. And I was like, maybe it's literally because yoga is sort of, your feet are on the ground, and you're, getting that balance going, and your stability and all that sort of thing. And I've always heard that one of the best things you can do is literally walk outside barefoot on grass or sand or whatever, because it genuinely grounds you, in the electrical sense. Where it allows like a lot of the electrical waves or whatever that are going through our body from screens and TVs and phones and everything all day, and it just kind of grounds you a little bit more. So I was thinking about that, and it's this sort of clarity piece, and it's difficult for me anyway to go hard in the morning like that, because I just feel like I haven't cleared it out yet, and it just feels a little bit more on edge or something like that. So, and I think it's an interesting thing to think about, because you also, you can't, like when racing or whatever, you can't always be how you want it. So what you're telling me is you're doing that, and you're not necessarily committing to always biking in the morning, but sometimes it's okay, because it's okay to feel a little bit off or a little bit uncomfortable. And how do you get through that? Because that's a big part of racing and just training in general, is how do you get through it when you're maybe not always optimum? Because that's one of the traps I fall into, is like, I'll think, well, I'll work out a little bit later today when I feel it. And then it just never comes around. I end up not doing it or something, you know what I mean? Instead of just getting in there and getting it done. And that's like everything. it's that premature optimization. You always want to feel great when you're working out, or you want to be in the greatest headspace when you start to write or work on a project or whatever. But sometimes you just got to start it. And that sounds like, to me, that's what you're doing, is you're just getting it started and then keeping it going.
Yeah. And I think in going back to like feeling grounded and or rooted, you know, is a good phrase too. Something I think about a lot. It's like, are you rooted in this? You know, do you have you, because in order to be rooted, you got to be grounded first, right? And kind of set in, and you're kind of digging in the trenches, and you're going to do it for a while. And, you know, I think one of the biggest things that you have to be wary of is, because again, like one of the biggest questions you have this time of year, I think we even saw this in, you know, in the closed Facebook group, is, you know, this is a time of year where you basically have two different types of people, right? You have the ones that are like, I need a break, right? I need a break. I've been training all year. I did a late season race. You know, I need a break. I thought I was ready to come back. Turns out I'm not, right? And that's usually from the chin up, not the chin down. I need a break. Or you've got people that are freaking out because it's like, oh my God, I had this really great year. I don't want to lose fitness. I don't want to lose fitness. You know, so you're kind of having to yo-yo back and forth. You know, explain to them, you know, in order to, you know, get better and to go faster, you have to unload at some point. You can't always be going up until you crash, right? And that's just not physically. Going back to the resistance thing, is you've only got a set amount of resistance, kind of, you know, the energy to battle resistance in a positive and effective manner in almost like every quarter, or honestly, like every month. I really think there's like very few, you have, you know, maybe 3 to 4 opportunities to be like, you know what, I just got to force myself to do this today. And then you do it and it turns out well. But that's not the mentality you want to have all the time.
Right.
Right. And because if you start to force yourself to do things, to go get in the pool or to get on your bike or to go out for a run, that might be okay for a couple of days. But then after a few days, you're going to be like, why am I doing this? And so you've got to be so, like, there was 2 instances today, specifically, like this morning. I told, maybe one was yesterday, and I told one athlete, said, listen, they're like, you know, I'm loving the pool. I'm loving it, you know. And these both athletes are also in kind of I would say a rougher spot, maybe mentally and emotionally, which again, I think is something you find athletes in frequently. When they're resistant, it's usually a combination of things. It's not just triathlon related. Triathlon might be the vessel in which you're expressing how you feel about the rest of your life, but it's usually cumulative, right? Because here's the thing. You can't bail on being a parent, right? You can't just not go to work, right? You can't just hide in a hole or go take 3 weeks of vacation and, you know, into Fiji. You got to keep showing up. Triathlon's optional, right? It's the other stuff you got to do no matter what. You've got to do it. Like, that's one of the things that, you know, Hayden will be like super frustrated about something. And he's like, it's really hard to be a kid. I'm like, dude, I get it, man. I'm like, you know, you're always told what to do. You can't do this. I'm like, I get it. But I was like, you want to trade places with me? You want to go to work today? You want to do this? You want to do that? You want to make my dinner? You want to clean the house? You want to do this? You want to go out waffles? You want to do this? He was like, no, I don't. I don't do that at all. I'm like, exactly. You just have so much to do. So when you have this other thing like triathlon is for us, because it's a hobby, we get to / want to / only do if we want to do it. So when the rest of your life feels like a have to, or you're forcing yourself to go into work, you're forcing yourself to do this, you're forcing yourself to do that, it comes out, right? The things that's taken out on is triathlon. Kind of like if you have a really bad day at work, you know, and you go home and you're grumpy and your kid's done nothing wrong, but you've got a short fuse with them. It's not their fault. It's the rest of the day. Like you're taking out the rest of the day on them, right? That's how we treat triathlon, because listen, and we've talked about this so many times in terms of like we put way too much stock in what triathlon can do for us instead of what we can do through triathlon and using it, you know, for good, and also limiting our expectations of it changing our life, right? You change your life. You do. Triathlon doesn't change your life. You change it through triathlon in a you know, variety of ways, as long as you're approaching it positively. So when it comes to backing down on things or not doing it, it's usually more of a symptom of the rest of your life than it is just triathlon. But we use triathlon and training, running, riding, swimming to deal with life. So we're kind of caught in a pickle, right? Like we're like, wait a minute. Life sucks, but I use triathlon to do it, but I really don't want to do it. So what the hell do I do? This is when you pick, right? Kind of going back to what I said about the athletes that I was working with, that was kind of going through a hard time. And I said, listen, I said, in the comments, you're like, I'm kind of going through a hard time, but right now I'm loving swimming. I don't know what it is, but I'm just loving it. And I just said, swim every day. If you want to swim every day, swim every day. I don't care if you bike or run, just swim. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're removing the two that are most likely to cause resistance, and you're opening up the door to more things that are going to be fulfilling. What are you also doing? Allowing them to be successful, right? Because all you got to do is go 1 for 1 for today. And it's the one you love, right? And guess what else it's doing? It's also the one that they love the most. Feed it to them. Don't force feed. We see coaches all the time. Well, Jonathan, in order to get your TSS and your CTL up by next March 30th, in order to do the peak phase for Texas 70.3, we must continue on this progression, do our 30-minute run today with strides, combined with our interval session in zone 4 today for a bike workout. And they're like, I don't give a fuck. I just want to swim. And you don't listen, right? Same thing with an athlete coming off a big race, huge, amazing kind of end of the season. And they're like, I today I felt like a badass running. And then the next 3 paragraphs were about how hard life was. And then you kind of look at training and you're like, all right, missed a couple bikes, hasn't swam in a week. I just said, listen, for the next couple weeks, just go run for 30 minutes a day. If you want to bike, go bike. If you want to swim, go swim. Don't care. But just go run. Why? Because you want to feed them opportunities and continue to give them what they like. It's like, hey, you like Reese's peanut butter cups? Yeah. Here's a Snickers. No thanks. Feed me the Reese's, right? And feed me the Reese's. Give people what they want. Set them up for success. Help them feel good, because what happens is it's just like in life, right? You have all these things that you're not dealing with. So you just shove them down and shove them down and shove them down and shove them down. Pretend like life's fine. And then what happens? Total epic meltdown, right? And it doesn't last for a day. It lasts for an extended period of time. Same thing happens in triathlon, right? When you're so resistant toward doing them, but you force and you force and you force and you force. One day you wake up and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And so you stop, right? Or you want to retire. Or you don't want to do triathlon this year. Like, the best thing to do is just do something, and to make it feel good. So again, you can only fight that resistant feeling for a certain amount of time before you remove everything. And then what you're also doing is you're removing the one piece of your life that you feel good about, right? Or that can allow you to deal with life. It's a really tricky situation, but it's one that you have to really, especially as a coach, right? And this is one of the biggest benefits of having a coach, is to have a sounding board and for them to say, it's okay to just bike. It's okay to just run. It's okay to do this. Like, that's fine, because type A people, what they want to do, they just want to do it all. And if they don't, they feel like a total failure. There is no B, C, D, and E. It's like, I'm either going to be an A+ day or an F-. There is no in between. Ain't nothing wrong with being a C someday. Just be average. Because you know what? Your average is probably already better than everyone else's A+. So it's a super fine line, but one you have to be really, really in touch with. Either listen to yourself really well, or have a coach that listens to you just as much.
Yeah, a lot of us tend to be real black and white on things like that. And you brought it up as like one of the things this time of year is athletes will say, I just need a break. And I think that immediately equates to I need a break from triathlon. And then they just don't do anything. But I say that a lot too. I feel like I need a break from, in life or whatever. And like you mentioned, a lot of people parenting and they work and it's all building up and I just need a break, and it's just, I need a break. And that sort of equates with, I just need to sit on the couch or whatever. Mm-hmm. But when you need a break, it's like, that's what I was thinking about last night, man, when I got out of that yoga class. And I'm going back to this, but it's my life experience. I'm sitting in that sauna and I felt like swimming, and I wasn't thinking about triathlon. I was just thinking about what felt good and what I wanted to do. It wasn't like I was running away from the sport or trying to just boycott, the whole deal or whatever. I was just feeling something that felt right. And there's so much power in that. If you, like you're saying about just go run or just swim every day or whatever the case may be, whatever's feeling right. I don't think we really mean we need a break from everything, because I think that it just, so whenever I think of that, or when people say that, is I need a break, and it just means they need to be, sitting on a beach for a week or something like that. And I don't necessarily think that that's what we want. You know what I mean? I think we need a break from the clutter and the claptrap going on in our brains. And it just becomes so confusing. And that's why I say when I talk about meditation, it's like we need to settle that down a little bit and figure out what feels good and what we want to do and how to, because that's what it is, right? We want to feel better, right? And when we need a break, it means everything is boiling over and we're not sure what the hell's going on a lot of times. It's like a lot of athletes will say things like, I'm sorry I didn't work out today, coach. I had a lot going. And I'm like, I never have to be sorry about anything ever. I'm just here to support you and help you find out what's going on. In fact, I have an athlete, he after the summer, he just, he's been into other things and stuff, and he wasn't doing anything. So one day I just tried an experiment. I put in 20-minute run every day. And then on Saturday I put 4 hours of golf, cause he likes to golf. I just wanted to see what he did. And he didn't really jive with it, but it's just like, but sometimes you try that, that's kind of where I'm at all the time. And I know you are. It's just like, where do you feel like going right now? What's giving you pleasure? Where's your bliss? And I just hate to, cause I think the avalanche of thoughts and overthinking gets so crazy sometimes that we just feel like we just don't feel like doing anything, but there might be something in there. For me, it's kind of been swimming, and, we have run camp coming up, and I'm just thinking about, I'm not worried about, but I haven't really felt like running a lot lately. And, we'll just see. It'll all be fine. It could turn into some hiking, and that might be the spark, right? And it usually is, actually. When people come to camp, it kind of gives you a little bit of adrenaline and a jolt. And I'm really looking forward to that, actually, because it's at a good time. It hits right before December, and, just being with people and everything, and that whole energizing factor of that is going to be hopefully something that gets some nice momentum for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you never want to write it all off. Right. Because, and that, again, that's one of the biggest things with people saying, I need a break from triathlon. Okay. Well, do you want to run? No, I want to break from triathlon. Well, that running isn't triathlon.
Right.
Neither is swimming. Neither is biking. Now, all three of them together, done in succession, that's triathlon, right? Again, they're trying to explain it to your family and friends for like the last 25 years. They still don't know what it is, but that's what it is. You can still do one, right? So find something, because quitting altogether just gets you further and further and further away, right? And it makes you feel worse, right? I think every quote unquote season in the last, I think since I started to coach since 2018 or 2017, every year I've taken time away from cycling and swimming and just ran. I just ran because, again, like going back to the beginning of the podcast, like sometime as a coach, like when you live and breathe your hobby and your passion and your favorite sport and your job, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like it becomes, and you need like you need space from it, because as a coach, like and again, this is why you see it's so hard to do both, right? It's hard to, that's why coaching full time is hard. You have to put yourself second and third and fourth. That's just the nature of it. And so I wouldn't change it for the world, but at the same time, like you have to do things for yourself, even though, as the athletes are always, well, you need to do this race and this race, come do this race with me. I'm like no, sometimes I just want to go do nothing triathlon related. Oh, maybe I need to go start playing tennis again. Something that's totally different. You can disassociate from, but I don't want to quit running and riding and swimming. Like I want to keep being active and doing something. You have to find something, right, to continue to do, because ultimately, like going back to the, our opening line of the podcast, on the front page of our website, it's happy and healthy, right? Because if you're happy and healthy, whatever that looks like, then you're going to be successful and you're going to be high performing in every aspect of your life, personally, professionally, with your hobbies, That's it. And the further you get away from happy, the less healthy you are too. And so there's a lot you can do this time of year to think through. And everyone wants to spend this time of year going over goals for next year. But before you go through your goals for next year, go back and look at your biggest obstacles or biggest failures of this last year. And then ask yourself, was that self-inflicted? Why did it happen? Why is it not going to happen this year? What can I do to, increase my odds of it not happening? Or what do I plan? Not hope, right? Because hope isn't a strategy. It's a wish. What do I plan to change about this, and this next year so it doesn't happen again? Because most of the things in our life are self-inflicted. Let's just be honest. We like to blame everyone else for most things, but most of the time it's self-inflicted. No, they didn't have time today. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You didn't make time, but don't tell me you didn't do it. Like, own it, right? And there's like, we don't have to own things anymore. We can just kind of like pawn it off on whatever, but it's like, own it. And so before you make goals for next year, look back at what you fell short on. Everybody falls short. What did you not do well? What did you not do good? Don't stand on your high horse because it's kind of like that, the reality check you have to give to athletes when they've been lazy and inconsistent for 6 to 8 months going into their big race of the year. And then the last 8 weeks they're coming in, they're like, Coach, I think I'm gonna do something special today. I'm like, you may pull one out of your ass today, but the numbers say, and your consistency says, unlikely to, right? Because this is something I like to do with athletes, try to get them. It's not about being Debbie Downs, being realistic. Everyone likes to look at the last four weeks of their training. Like, yeah, I've been putting in a main hours, right? What'd you average the last 6 months? 4 hours a week? It's not really going to yield a great result, right? But we get so trapped in where we are now, in that this small little span of time is going to make or break. It's not. It's about being able to do it consistently for a long period of time. So if you're that person that yo-yos back and forth, don't say you want to do more. Tell me why you haven't done it in the past. Well, I just didn't want to. Okay, that's not an answer. That's not an answer. It's like when Hayden, when he's like, why can't I? Just because why? He's like, that's not a reason. I'm like, damn it, you're right. And then I have to explain why you can't do something. Like, don't say, oh, I'm gonna change. What are you gonna change specifically? Give me thought out 1, 2, 3, 4 about why this will be different, and this is the intended result that we're going to get from it. Okay, now we get something to work with. Is something to commit to? Yes. Everyone wants to commit to numbers, right? To goals, to sub 5s or sub 6s, or Boston Marathon qualifying times, or top 50% in their age group. I'm like, that's great. Those are great things to have. But have you thought about how you're going to get there and the numbers that are required to achieve that? And not the numbers, but the work that goes into it. And then once you figured out the work that goes into it, how have you figured out how you're going to get that work in? And now once you've figured out how to get that work in, have you figured out how to have time management and boundaries to where you can execute it, right? But those aren't the fun things to think about. Everyone, wants to, have this, but it's like, well, you got to build it. Like, nah, can I just get one? Can I just get one? Anyone wants to build stuff, right? But it's more enriching and purposeful to do it yourself. That's why people are so proud of, you make a kid work for their first car they ever get. They treat it like it's a fucking Rolls Royce, right? Even if it's like a 1972 Camaro, which is a pretty sweet car, by the way.
Yeah, I had.
They would wash it every week, right? They would treat it like gold because they earned it. They worked hard for it. They see it and they know meaning behind it. Then you see, like 16-year-olds driving Range Rovers and they drive them around like they're fucking bumper cars, right? Because they have no sense of what came from it and how you got there. And that's the same thing with training, right? It's like you have to work hard to get to where you really, really, really want to go. And then not just get somewhere better, but also appreciate it more. But you got to work through the path to get there first. You can't just want and hope your way to a great race or a great season. You got to strip it down to bare bones and figure the things out. And then that goes back to, well, I got burnt out twice last year. Okay, perfect. How can we not get burnt out this year, right? How can we keep it going? Is it doing run only for a certain amount of months, doing swim only, doing bike only, just staying in the same building, right? In the same stadium, right? Being in the stands, that's fine. it's not watching from home, right? You don't have to be in the playing field doing all three. You don't have to be in the stands. Maybe just be in the parking lot. But don't be at home watching triathlon on TV. Be at least somewhere in the mix. But don't be so stubborn against yourself and so resistant that you eventually become so negative and resentful, because that's what happens, right? That's what equals is a certain amount of time of being resistant towards something equals eventual resentment. You force yourself to do it for so long you don't want to, but you start to resent it, and then when you start to resent it, you're just not going to do it, and you just want distance from it. And then again, what does that breed back? Right? If your resentment towards something continues to build, the level of your resistance continues to go higher and higher and higher. And the farther you get away from it, the higher it goes. The more you don't want to do it anymore. So you just gotta stay in the room with it, and then listen to your body, and ultimately ask yourself what makes you happy, not what your buddies makes you happy. Well, not what your tribe buddies, not what you think your coach. I mean, it's funny. Like, I know you've had this too. We've talked about it. You have athletes like, hey, I think I just want to run. I just want to run this year. I think I want to take a little bit of time back. I don't want to do so many hours. I think I just want to run this year. It fits better in my life. And we're like, sweet, let's do it. They're like, thank you. I was nervous. I was, that's such a relief. I'm like, what do you mean that was a relief to me? Relief to you? I'm like, well, I thought you'd be, I'm like, I could give less of a shit if you want to do triathlon this year. I just want you to be happy. Right. And I think it's just funny how we've gotten so far from, doing what's best for ourselves because we care so much more about what other people think or what they'll say or what we think they want us to do. And we just put ourselves on the shelf. Right. And then forget about it. It's like, and now it's like this huge awakening. Like, you know what? I think I'm gonna make myself happy. But like, what? Wait a minute. This is earth shattering. This is somebody write a book about this. I'm like, no, this is just simple stuff that we've just gone way off the reservation with about, you always got to put everyone else first. No, you don't. You got to put yourself first. It's not selfish. It's called self-care.
That car thing, your first car thing reminded me of my first car, and it makes me laugh. I was 18 years old. I was senior in high school, and I'd always wanted a car. And it was like a Friday night at 10:30 or something like that. And I remember my dad coming home. He was a late nighter for a while there. And he came in and he woke me up. He goes, Mike. I said, what? And he threw a keychain on my stomach, and he goes, there, I got you a car. It's 10:30 on a Friday night. I go, what do you mean? He goes,
he probably won in a poker game.
He did. I won it tonight in a card game. 73 Cutlass. I go, you're shitting me. And he goes, nah, it's out front. And I went out and got in, and I drove it down the block and hit the brakes, and that thing went straight left. So one of his buddies just like had all these extra cars and shit, and he wanted. But anyway, back to what you're saying.
I can still see your dad right now coming back and knew he won in a card game. It's classic.
Won it in a card game. I don't know how much it was, But
Jimmy thought he had it with the 3 of a kind, and I fucked him over with the full house on the last card.
Royal fucking flush. But no, but man, okay, we have to make an assumption here, right? A general assumption about most people, or I would hope to say most people in this podcast, that they actually like triathlon, right? And then, it's back to what you're saying about, you and I were always talking triathlon. We talk this, and we, a lot of times before the podcast, we talk about football, It's sort of, you just need a little break, from, and a lot of people, triathlon can be a consuming sport. You're talking 10 to 15 hours a week sometimes. It's really a part-time job. And then, of course, you're at home watching videos about it, and you get kind of obsessed with it depending on what stage or phase you're in. And, sometimes you just need to, I think, a little departure in what you're saying about just running or just swimming or whatever. And my thought on that is what can you do? And again, this is a perfect time of the year for it, to sort of supplement or complement your triathlon training. It sort of reminds me, of a story. I was always a big Elton John fan growing up. And but more so, I was a fan of the guy who wrote his lyrics, is Bernie Taupin. And I think I might have told this story years ago, but one time when I lived in Nashville, I had the opportunity to meet him because I was working for the news and they were doing a special on him because he was in town showing his art. You know, he was a lyricist and that's what he did his whole life. And here he is in Nashville with a big art exhibit, all of his paintings. And, you know, I can only assume that he's like, I want to be creative, but I need a departure here a little bit. But this is all complementary in the sense that it keeps my brain going. It gets me thinking creatively in a different way. And I got to meet him and he totally blew me off. It's like my idol. And the reason was, I think, is because all I wanted to do was talk to him about his lyrics and all that shit. And he probably, you know, that's what he does. He's done for the last 50 years or whatever, talk about lyrics. And he wanted to just be there and celebrate his art and his new passion or his temporary passion or whatever it is. And that's a good way to look at it, I think, is you can find temporary passions. And like you said, just because you're swimming, that doesn't mean you have to think about triathlon. You can kind of like get in there and be like, man, I'm going to really be a swimmer. And that's what I've been going through a lot lately. And there's all kinds of different ways, I guess, that you can complement and supplement triathlon without getting burnt out on it. I mean, everybody has, you know, all pro sports and pro athletes, they have, you know, off seasons, and I'm sure they obviously work on things, but they're not playing football every day. You know, in the off season, they're working on their bodies or working on their minds or doing what it takes to kind of get that grounding again and get your stability and base set up in such a way that you can go out and do it, you know? So there's nothing better, I think, than in sort of diversifying your training with supplementary pieces that really kind of take your mind away a little bit. You know, it's really hard to grind through a whole season of Ironman training and then just go right back into it. You know, it's just really hard. I mean, I did video my whole life when I was in news marketing and stuff like that. And then I quit because I was sick of the news, but that's a different story. And then the only thing I had really at the time was I went out and started doing freelance video, and I realized, shit, I'm doing the same thing that I just quit, that I was sick of. So, you know, I think I took a little part-time job and got my mind off it a little bit. But anyway, find something that supplements. And now here you are. Yeah.
Here we are. Yeah. It's one of those, it's funny, right? Because, you know, going back to, I think last week's podcast and when I was talking about Hairgate and, you know, I was like, you're right. You know, and then I got to thinking the other day, I'm like, my God, I'm like 42. I'm so young. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, because our immediate thought, right, is always, I have to do it now. I have to do it now. And that's not the answer. And it's never the case, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe as you know, maybe in like your 70s, right? I got to do it now, maybe. But because I was walking down the street and I was looking at all the parents, like, or just not looking at, but like thinking of all the parents in our block and kids. And I was like, I think we're one of like the youngest people in our block. And not by like, you know, a lot, but like, you know, most of them are like close to 50. And I'm like, man, we're like, I always think I'm old, you know, then I'm like, man, I'm only 42. You know, it's like, I was joking with this other athlete who was turning 30 and kind of having a hard time with it. And it's a big number. And I said, listen, when I turned 30, I was a low-life drunk with nothing going for me. I was like, and it was nothing. And then here I am 12 years later, and, you know, I got a mediocre podcast with a guy that goes to Boca del Vista where I talk about me losing my hair, you know, falling out. So things are looking up, right? Like things have improved drastically over the last 12 years. But no, in all seriousness, it's like, you don't have to do it now, but you don't have to do that right now, right? It doesn't have to be done immediately, right? You know, and that's like one of my biggest, it's like bones to pick with like Training Peaks and how we feel like we have to do things as a coach by putting events in Training Peaks. Cause I think it immediately adds pressure. Like, yes, you need to know from a coaching standpoint when an athlete races. But when you see that, right, you open up Training Peaks and you got your 30-minute run today, and then above it, you got 31 weeks till whatever race. And I think it immediately does one of two things. Either drives your motivation or it makes you feel, hey, I don't think I'm going to be ready. Now, I mean, if I miss today or it goes well, and like, wait, what if we just removed it? You know, what if like, I'd love to take like a set group of athletes and be like, all right, what do you want to train for? I want to train for a 70.3. I'm in best shape of my life. Right, fine. Let's train for that, but you're not going to sign up for any races. I'll let you know with about 6 weeks out when I think you're there to go look and pick out a race. It's funny because like one of the very first blog articles I think I read like back in the day was from Brett Sutton, and he said that's exactly what he did for like Chrissy Wellington and Danielle Reeve when he first started working with them. He said they would just train, and then on like a Monday or a Tuesday before the race, he'd be like, "Oh my God, you are peaking. You're in the best play," and then go and then send them to a race, and they just crush everybody, right? Because you get so focused on just doing the work and being your best that you don't have. Because what happens a lot of time is races shortchange and shortcut your way to the best version of you, right? Because you feel so much pressure, or you especially with athletes that are self-coached, they, doing half marathons, 70.3 is full. Is like you put a date on the calendar. Guess who doesn't care? Your body does not care. Doesn't care. And I have conversations with athletes like this all the time. I'm like, listen, it's not my fault you scheduled this race. That's not my fault. My job is to get you to the start line healthy and as fit as I can, but we don't skip steps. Right? If you don't wonder why people get hurt and burnt out and never progress, it's because they skip steps, right? They rush the start line. It's like meeting somebody, yesterday, and you rush the altar to get married. Big mistake, right? Probably got to court them for a long period of time to really figure things out. Same thing goes to racing. Like, you can't cheat steps. You have to take time, and so you think about the freedom that would allow for you. I'm just going to train to get really, really fit, and then all I'm worried about is just doing the work, and then I get in really, really good shape, and then like, you know what, I'm there. I'm where I want to be, and there is no date, there is no month, there is no whatever, there is no specific race. Just, man, and then like, hey, let's go shoot for this race. I think we're in a really, really good spot. Let's do it. And obviously, that's not feasible for most athletes because you got to plan, you got to do this, but part of the obsession, and I think in one of the biggest myths of training in triathlon is the obsession over planning and logistics isn't necessary. It's just one of those things that makes people feel comfortable, right? It's your thing. Like, I have to plan it out. I got to just like, no, first of all, you don't have to. You want to, but you don't have to. That's not the key to making you better. You just like to do it, right? Big difference. It's and so the same thing goes with training and racing. But when you're progressing, is this like just focus on progressing. Put a note somewhere where you got a race and then hide it and just like be like, I'm going to commit to seeing how fit I can be in the next 16 weeks. And then in the 16 weeks, see how much fitter you got. And then okay, let me do that again. Because that feels good. Again, like as a coach, you usually have two sets of athletes, the ones that love to race every week and every month. And you're like, we got to slow your roll. And the other ones that are like, yeah, I'm good just racing once a month, or excuse me, once a year. And then they get to racing, like, I don't even think I like racing. Like, I just want to train. And like, and those athletes are almost always the best athletes because they're more concerned with just training and doing the work than they are, interrupting themselves with every 5K, 10K, color run, century ride, trail run on the planet. And then they're wondering why they aren't progressing, but again, it goes down to what you want to do and your level and trajectory of happiness, not everyone else's, but yours. So it can look different, but you gotta hold fast, to it and be, and ultimately just be true to yourself and then understand again, like, you want to do this, you want to do that, you want to do this, you want to do that. But like, you gotta, again, you can't always be all in or all out. You can't, because almost always the all out is going to be more than the all in as you come out in the negative, right? It's like I had this discussion with an athlete a few weeks ago. They were doing 70.3 worlds. Like, I don't really know what I want to do. Maybe I just go back to just running. I really want to be the best this. And I was like, well, and I was like, the important thing, it's a single mom with a unbelievably like way up, high up, very important job. And I was like, and she said, she's like, my first two priorities are, I want to be the best mother I can be, and then I want to be the best professional I can be, and then I want to do triathlon. I said, well, that's too much. That's those two things are going to affect the third, and that's totally fine. It's fine for me, but is it fine for you? because that's one of the hard conversations you have to have again when we compare ourselves to other people, or I want to break this time, or I want to qualify for this, is that there's really only room for two things in your life, and some people maybe one, where these are my main 100% priorities, because that takes a lot of work, right? If you really, really want to be great at, for this athlete, being a mom and being, a great professional. And I told her flat, I said, listen, honestly, all I really care about is that you're a great mom. That's all I care about. Take care of your kids. The rest of the stuff is fine. But are you able to be objective when it comes to, what? I can still do well in triathlon. I only have 8 to 9 hours a week to train for 70.3s, and I can still be competitive. Will I be my best relative to if you were single with no kids and, flexible job you didn't give a shit about? Probably not. But would you trade that for being the best mom, being the best professional, and being really good? And that's only for the athlete to answer, right? That's not up to the coach. But that's like one of the hardest questions I think athletes have to ask themselves when they see other people's volume and training and this, and like, you don't know, they could be the shittiest parent on the planet. They could be they could be a lazy worker, whatever, but they put in 40 hours a week in and they just smash their 5K, and you're like, man, maybe I'm like, what? No. We compare so much without, like, we see 1%, like, on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. You see a picture, you're like, man, their life must be great, right? And as a coach, you and I usually get a chuckle because we get the dirty laundry. We hear the dirty laundry of everyone's life: the good, the bad, the ugly, the depression, the anxiety, the hurt, the turmoil, the greatness. We see it all. We see all the dirty laundry. Social media is the dry cleaning, right? It comes out nice and pressed. You got a lot of starch. Your pleats are popping. Like, that's what everybody else sees, right? Yep. We see the rest, and that's just one of those things where when you're comparing yourself to, let me just cover your kids' ears. This is gonna be an explosive podcast anyway because we've already dropped bombs. But if you're comparing yourself to things you see on social media, you're comparing yourself to bullshit. Mm-hmm. You're just comparing yourself to bullshit. And think about how much work and energy and effort you are doing to compare yourself and have expectations gained from total bullshit, right? Total fakeness, total BS. Not even someone else's happiness, someone else's fake happiness. And you're changing your trajectory of your life, of doing races or doing jobs or what to do with your house or what car to drive based on what you see. It's a total invasion of your focus and attention, which should be on the 1-2 things, right, that you should focus on. Like, I think I mentioned this to you off air last week or something of a podcast I listened to, and the guy was like, yeah, it really changed my life. And maybe we would mention this on last week, I don't know, he said, I had to ask myself one day, what one thing would totally change my life? What one thing would just totally change it? And his answer was, if I lost my child. Mm-hmm. And he said, once I answered that question, I reframed everything that I did. He was a former pro triathlete. Some I'm super familiar with, but most people wouldn't, because he's way back in like the olden times, as Hayden would say, in the 2000s. And he said, it totally changed my life. He said, if something happened to this 3-year-old, it would absolutely destroy me. And so he flipped everything, all of his priorities. And he said, I just wanted to become the best father I could possibly be. And then from then on, that was his focus. And I didn't give up triathlon, but everything changed. Everything took a different spin. And he goes on to talk about how much happier he is, all these kind of different things. But it's a fascinating question for us to all ask ourselves. It's like, what 1 or 2 things, if you lost, would just be devastating to you? And usually the inverse is what you want, is what you tend to focus the most on, or what you should focus the most on, right? And, whether it's I want to be the best father or the best professional or the best coach or the best husband or the best mother or the best wife, like all these things, if that's your number 1, number 2, then I'll be honest, you don't have room to be the best at something else. But the cool thing is that's okay, right? You can still be really, really, really good. But again, and I think we've even had like a podcast title. It's like, great is the enemy of good. And it's not just the enemy, it destroys it. And it destroys people's health. It destroys people's image of themselves. It destroys people's race season. It destroys people's lives. It just by, it's like, because I was reading an article a couple weeks ago about how I think it was like 72% of all people that changed jobs during the pandemic regret it.
It's probably like the transfer portal.
They thought the grass was greener, or I don't want to go back to the office. Like, I got to work remote. I got to do this, and now they all regret it. Not all, but 72% of it is obviously, a specific poll. But it's like, that's just one example, right? Of great is the enemy of good. Good is really, really good, and for the most part, if you can sustain good for a long period of time, guess what that does? That's freaking great, right? Like, it's just how much we overcomplicate and make everyone else's life our own. And you take pictures and screenshots and things on social media, like, hey, I want that. I'm like, do you? Like, that? Do you really? And like what matters and our attention and our focus and what it should be. And again, it all comes back to, what are you going to do day to day that you can do day after day that's going to make you the happiest and healthiest version of yourself? And also be really, really good at triathlon if you want to be. But that comes with time, right? 4, 5, 6, 7 years to get to squeeze out, the best. Or you can decide to be just to, put every other part of your life on hold, to become the best triathlete you can and do it for 1 or 2 years and quit. And then what are you left with? Right? A washed up hobby. It's just, it's something you see a lot as a coach, especially when doing it as long as you and I have.
Yeah. You got to do shit that matters to you. Right. And, it's so weird to think about, because, I've been on the podium. I've won power bars before.
You probably still got the fucking box.
But back then, I was I was a little more juiced up about things. I was like pushing it, but it wasn't my goal. But think about like how going through the whole process with the goal of like the getting on the podium, which I've done for years. It's just so even when you get there, it's like, okay, whatever. But I just went through all this shit that I had to force myself to do all the time because I didn't have like. It's funny you mentioned, and we can end it obviously, but that you said, you kind of think yourself as getting old sometimes. And it's like, I am old and I keep thinking of myself as young, and I actually tell athletes that usually when I interview, and it's sort of like my goal in life is to keep feeling younger. And so what's that going to take? And I think that has a lot to do with doing, stuff like you're saying, that triathlete about his son, and doing shit that matters, that feels right and makes you feel younger, which makes you feel happier and healthy. And for me, I've always said it, but at some point in your life, your health is going to be the most important thing you got. And that's what makes you feel good. What makes you be happy. Those are the, veins you have to follow in life, I believe. You don't transfer jobs, in the middle of a pandemic and be unhappy just because it's like, I need a break. It's sort of that reactionary thing a lot of times. And just go find it, man. Find what matters.
Yeah. And then lastly, like, have a couple people close to you in your life that are willing to remind you of that. Mm-hmm. Right? That aren't the ones that are going to hop on your bandwagon of ideas every time. Oh, yeah, dude, go for it. Crush it. Let's do it. Always have the ones that are like, you sure that's the right thing? Right time? Are you sure that's what you really want to do? It's being the ultimate level of supportive, because you're not along for the ride, right? Because it's usually going to be a short one if that's the case. But you're there for them, right? You're not there for their race or for their journey through that race. You're there for them and who they are. Not that they just do triathlon, but it's you got to have people close to you that are willing to ask you those tough questions that, because everyone wants to say yes. Everyone wants to say do this or do that and do this and do that. But you gotta have people that are and not just have people that are willing to give you that kind of, positives and negatives, but you got to have enough faith in yourself and confidence, and most importantly, vulnerability to ask, right? Hey, what do you think about this? Tell me the truth. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear, right? Because you're not getting advice. You're getting somebody to it's the same thing. It's like, people who are Republicans all they do is watch, Fox News. People who are Democrats only watch CNN. Like, you're not watching anything. Like, you're not learning anything. You're just watching things that reinforce your way of already thinking, right? It's like the same thing. Don't always ask people questions of, that they're always going to say yes to, because you're not getting any feedback, right? You're just getting somebody blowing smoke up your ass. It's just one of those things you have to have people close to there, because it'll save you to have people like that to give you their, because then it makes you think, right? Make you think longer and harder about things and come to realization. So, keep those friends close, and make sure you have them too, that are willing to, ask questions. And it's not, people always think it's being critical, but it's not. It's called caring. And criticism is oftentimes confused with really caring about somebody. Why are you always so critical? Why are you so down this? I'm not. I just really care about you as a person. And so I have to ask all these other questions, because if I didn't, then I just wouldn't care, right? I would just be saying yes because you want to say yes. And that's just me being, not caring about the situation.
Well, one great way to be happy next year is to have a nice plan for your race. We are so terrible at that.
I was going to say, man, we're the worst. It is. We have a week into our opening up of the 2023 race specific plans we've got going on. Those are on the website. Again, those include an 8-week prep plan, and they're good for any race. We've got them listed on the website for a specific Ironman race, but then we have them below, ready for other races that you might do. Already had a bunch of people hop in and purchase them, and then I've had quite a few ask questions about, what about this race, or what if I need to start early, like, Oceanside, April 1st. Got 2 people doing that, so it's good for any race, any 70.3, any full. They're based on the courses, right? So rolling, hilly, flat, ocean swim, downstream swim, those kind of things. So they're geared towards that, but they can be good for anything. It's at any time of year. So hop in there, check those out. Those are good on sale up to the end of the month, or until we sell out of each one. And you can find that again on the website, C26triathlon.com. It's on the front page, but then you can go and click on our training plans. And also, if you have questions or the interest in getting coaching for next year, reach out, because those rosters are filling up. You can click on the coaching tab, find our list of coaches, and pick from one of those. And as always, if you need anything from Mike, he's available, CrushingIron@gmail.com. And if you need anything from me, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right. That'll do it.
We'll see you Thursday.
Sounds good. See you, bud.